Raleigh Score, in conjunction with Shaw University, introduces. Are you ready to start your own business? We are excited to have you join us on this 13-week journey. Our goal is to provide you with a consistent message and a solid methodology. Our approach is simplistic in nature. Therefore, we believe if you are committed and willing to do the work, you will come away from this program confident that your business plan is solid. Welcome to the pre-recorded video of Session 7, which is titled, Risk Mitigation and Navigating Obstacles and Setbacks. In this session, we'll look at ways to mitigate the risk identified in the SWOT analysis. This session will also discuss ways you can navigate potential obstacles, or setbacks that may arise as you build your business. Lastly, we will discuss why mindfulness matters and offer a few extra tools to add to your mindfulness toolkit. Your facilitators for today's discussions are Bill Davis, Dr. Angie Arrington, and Sharon Shelton. As outlined in Session 6, the SWOT analysis is a technique for assessing 4 important aspects of your business. It can help you reduce the chances of risk-related failure, and help you craft a strategy that distinguishes you from your competitors, while allowing you to compete successfully in your market. 90% of all business risks can be greatly reduced by simply identifying and addressing the risk factors that you uncover in your SWOT. So, as always, please find a quiet space and be prepared to take copious notes. If you have any questions, please email them to patty.williams@scorevolunteer.org. Enjoy the training.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bill Davis. Welcome back to session number 7 of the Business Plan and Entrepreneurial Support Program. We're going to pick up where we left off last week in the business plan portion, which was doing a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And what you see in front of you is a representation of a SWOT. Actually, I drew this from my coaching and small business coaching and consulting business. And what I've done here is listed the 3 key strengths when I started that business, which was my business knowledge. I had a unique service offering and I was very well networked. The opportunities that I had in the triangle, it's a very large market of small businesses. Corporations and companies continue to downsize, which meant more and more small businesses were formulating. And the triangle area is an attractive place to live, so that meant that more and more people moving into the triangle area, which created opportunities for people that wanted to start businesses, etc. A great environment for a small business coaching and consulting firm. My weaknesses were I had no business location. My business did not have any credibility, and I didn't have a lot of promotional resource. The threats I was faced with is a very competitive market. There are lots of business coaches in the triangle area. One of my biggest competitive considerations was that those same small business owners that I was interested in, they got a lot of what they wanted through online training. So it wasn't that I competed necessarily always against other coaches. I was competing against things like online training. And then there was the threat of economic cycles. If the economy was good, that was great. If it wasn't good, that could be problematic. And I didn't have any control over that. All I could do was react to that. So that's the SWOT analysis we're going to work with. And tonight, what we're going to be talking about is once you've done the work of determining your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, what do you do with them? It's not just enough to know them. And that process is what we call risk mitigation, or trying to minimize the impact of the weaknesses and the threats on your business, okay? So if you'll throw the slide, Jay. Now, you can go at this from writing a lot of words. I have found that an effective way is to turn it into a chart and assign some numbers, and it'll lead you to the things you have to work with. So let's talk about this chart, because after you do your SWOT, you're going to want to analyze what risks are revealed by that understanding. So what I've done across the top of this chart is I've listed my opportunities and my threats. So you'll see large number of small businesses, companies continue to downsize, triangle area is an attractive place to live. The threats are lots of business coaches, online training, and economic cycles. And then I've listed my strengths and my weaknesses. Those are the things that I can control and do something about. The opportunities and the threats I can only take advantage of and react to. But the strengths are the business knowledge, the unique service offering, that I was well networked. And the weaknesses were that I didn't have any business location, I didn't have credibility as a business, and I didn't have any resources to do any promotion for my business. Then what I did for each of those, I rated them on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of the impact. So in other words, if I look at the strength business knowledge and I look at the large number of small businesses, the question is, how much does the strength of business knowledge take advantage of the opportunity of large numbers of small business? I rated that as a 10, okay? And then if I looked at how much advantage I could take of big companies continuing to downsize as a result of my business knowledge, I rated that an 8. The fact that the triangle area was an attractive place to live, I rated how strong the business knowledge could take advantage of that opportunity as a 5, okay? So now you all see how the matrix works. And I did that for each one of them, okay? So like for unique service offerings relative to the large number of small businesses, that was an 8. Relative to the companies continuing to downsize, that was a 5. Relative to triangle area, attractive place to live, I rated that a 5. And then you can go through the chart and see how that's done. Then what I did is I added the numbers across and down, very simply. So for business knowledge, I added the 10, the 9, the 5, the 8, the 8, the 8, that gave me 48. And after I had added those across and down, what I was looking for in terms of strengths or opportunities, I'm looking for the largest number, okay? In terms of threats and weaknesses, I'm looking for the smallest number, because those smaller numbers are risks that I need to figure out a way to mitigate so that they won't negatively impact my business. The larger numbers in terms of strengths and opportunities are opportunities that I can probably develop strategies around to benefit my business, okay? Jay, if you'll go to the next slide. So using that analysis, I developed 3 strategies, 2 of them around my weaknesses and threats, and 1 to take advantage of my strongest element in my business. So let's look at it. I didn't have a business location and I didn't have credibility. So my strategy was to conduct my programs or my business at the City Club of Raleigh. Now, the City Club of Raleigh is a business club. It's considered prestigious. When a member walks into that club, the entire staff refers to them by name. So there was a lot of implied credibility by utilizing that location And it also gave me a place to do my business. So in other words, by utilizing or by developing that strategy of conducting my business out of the Capital City Club or the City Club of Raleigh, it mitigated the risk that I had of not having a business location and not having credibility. In terms of the economic threats, which are clearly beyond the control, I developed a strategy of building my programs around the theme of small businesses can succeed in good times or bad. And so when times were good, it's not hard to get clients. When times are bad, it helped my business look like a place that might be a good place for you to go to get some help, even though the economic cycle was down. In fact, I launched one of the most successful programs in my business right in the midst of the 2008 economic crash. And it was built pretty much around, around that theme. And then my strength of my business knowledge, the way that I applied that is I developed a strategy in my business, is that I said what was different about my business is that I actually got in the trenches with my clients, because I could take that business knowledge and not only quote unquote tell them things, I could actually get in and help them execute those things, or I could create programs that they could utilize to execute or grow their business the way they were attempting to grow their business. So these are 3 strategies that I developed in that business as a result of my SWOT analysis and figuring out what do I do about these risks that I have, rather than encountering the risk after I started the business. The idea was, what can I do that will reduce those risks so that they won't, quote unquote, hurt my business, okay? Now, before I give the assignment, I've just covered a whole lot of information, but before I go to the assignment, I want to stop and address any questions that you may have about this. How exactly did you assign the numbers to each category? That was a subjective decision on my part. When I considered it, it was really relative. It's kind of like, well, you know, if I've got a large number of businesses, how can business knowledge help me? And I would come up with a relative number. There's nothing absolute about it, other than if I thought it was a plus, it got higher than a 5. If I thought it would hurt me or it was weak, it got less than a 5. And then it was a matter of how strong it was or how weak it was. What criteria did I use to determine what component of your SWOT that you would approach first? Once I completed the SWOT, I put in my ratings and I just went by the numbers, which is one of the reasons I love that approach to doing the risk analysis. It one, makes things clear, and I think it makes things simple, because all I did is determined the impact, and then I added them across. If it was a big number, I thought about developing a strategy around it. If it was a small number, I knew I needed to develop a strategy around it. Okay, I am far in the process. The market is questionable. How do I think about using SWOT now? If I understand the question, you can do a SWOT at any time. I mean, if you're already in business, you can still do a strengths, weakness, opportunity, and threat analysis. In fact, it's good to do that periodically because things change. And as things change, what you do about them, should also change. So you should do a SWOT analysis now. And to the question of the market is questionable, I'm not clear whether you're saying that you're not really clear about what your target market is, or that the performance in your target market is declining. So I don't know quite how to answer that question, but I would say doing your SWOT analysis might give you insight to that statement about the market is questionable. If I had a tight budget, how did I get into the City Club? Isn't it expensive, exclusive, and private? Number one, no, it's not expensive. It is costly. They have various levels of membership. And I spent quote unquote all my money doing that. That was my promotion program. Okay. So
Bill is frozen.
okay. But that was my whole budget in actuality. And I made sure that one of the first things I extracted from my revenues was my fee for the membership. Darlene, you're raising your hand.
Yes, you got cut off, so we didn't hear what you said before your budget. So if you could cover that again, you froze for just a moment.
Right. Okay. So the question I was asking was, if I had a tight budget, how could I afford my membership in the City Club of Raleigh? And I was saying, one, it actually isn't as expensive as most people think it is once you see what the actual membership fees are. And there are a range of fees, actually. My biggest cost when I started was that if I ran a program, in addition to my monthly fee, I had to feed my participants. I had to buy a meal. And in all candor, when I was starting my business, a very large percentage of my total revenues went to covering the cost of the program. But that was a cost that was justifiable to get up and going, to develop credibility, to get started, etc. Okay. I was trying to find out where I am in terms of the questions. Okay. Will all the points fit to the table like you had them in the SWOT analysis? Is there any rule of thumb of something like defining these points that are common to SWOT? If I understand the question, I actually, when I did my full SWOT analysis, I had more strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats. What I did is in this instance, I narrowed it down to 3 in each category that I thought had the biggest impact on my business, and worked with those first. Now I use 3, you could use 4, you could use 5. The idea is you don't want to make it more complex than you're willing to work with. And so, in fact, that's why I use 3. But there is no limit to the number of strengths, weaknesses, etc. The more you use, the bigger your matrix gets. And so you want to keep that manageable. How would I handle my promotion now amidst COVID? We're going to do a roundtable on marketing, not this coming Wednesday, the next Wednesday. I don't have a calendar in front of me. Is that November 2nd? Somebody help me out. Is that November 2nd? But my suggestion is
November 4th. That's going to be
November 4th. Let me request that you bring that question to the marketing roundtable, because we could we could, that deserves more time than we have tonight to answer that question. Okay, I think I've answered all the questions in the chat box. So here's your assignment this week. First, do a SWOT risk analysis. Now, that also means you will need to have done your SWOT. And to do your SWOT, you will have need to have figured out and sized your target market. You will have needed to have written your mission, and you would have need to have done your vision statement. In other words, you need to have done all your homework to be able to do this and it be effective. And then after you've done your SWOT analysis, and I suggest that you use the same approach that I demonstrated tonight, develop strategies to mitigate your greatest risk. Okay. And again, if you send those assignments to me, I will review them and I will comment back to you. I will tell you your SWOT analysis, getting a business going and running a business has bumpy roads. What the SWOT analysis does is it allows you to anticipate some of those bumps and deal with them before they occur. And if you deal with them before they occur, they don't occur. And that's, it's that many fewer bumps in the road that you have to deal with. Any questions about this week's assignment relative to risk mitigation? Okay, well, hearing none and seeing none, that's part of this area of the business plan for tonight. And I look forward to seeing those of you at next week's roundtable, which will be about target market. So any questions you have about your target market, come to the roundtable next Wednesday evening, 6 p.m. on this same Zoom link. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Angie, and I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about setbacks, obstacles, and risks using lessons learned and what I'm calling failing forward. And this is a little bit about my personal journey. I've been an entrepreneur for 20 plus years. Now, I know I was born yesterday, or started yesterday, but I had a very successful business in the federal government market in the early 90s. It was a time when we were jumping the job track into entrepreneurship. So I was able to convince my then employer to contract me for 2 years. So I had a little cushion to go out to start my own business. I didn't have any capital to get started or anything. And frankly, I didn't know what a SWOT was, let alone the capability of conducting a SWOT analysis. And so part of what I want to share tonight, hopefully, are some valuable lessons learned around why it's important to have a plan, to do the work on the front end. I was truly bootstrapping, i.e., going out there and learning while I was growing the business. The strength I had I known what SWOTs were then, Bill, was that I had credibility already because I went into an industry that I was already working in. It was something I was very passionate about. I was directing conventions for the National Academy of Sciences and working with a lot of really smart people. And through that, I developed quite a reputation. And so as I went out on my own, I became 8A certified with the federal government, got in with one client. And from there, when you work smart and build relationships, of course, you get that word of mouth. And even with all the technology today, word of mouth is still very relevant. In fact, I'm experiencing some of that right now in this current business. But what I wanted to share is, so that business grew overnight from when I launched or jumped that job track to with $0 coming in other than the the contract I had from the employer to over $500,000 in federal government work. And I thought I'd go into the basement of my home and write a marketing plan and learn all this nifty stuff that Bill and Jay in particular have been teaching you and us about how to do things the right way. Well, things started happening very rapidly. And before I knew it, we were massively successful. I even acquired another business larger than the business I was operating. The business I was operating, Multi Consultant Associates, or MCA, was had just become a newly 8A certified firm. And there were companies who graduated from the program. It's a 9-year program if you're not familiar with it. So the companies who were graduating from the program were seeking to partner with new firms so that they could continue to take advantage of that. So before we knew it, here we were acquiring this company, becoming a multi-million-dollar firm overnight. Mind you, we started this business with $1,000 and a used computer that my employer let me have that had been my computer at my job. And so somehow, if you could go to the next slide, Jay, Oprah Winfrey Harpo Studios found out about some of the work that we were doing and reached out to invite us to come on the show, to invite me to come on the show. And this was in the 90s. They were looking for ordinary people who were doing extraordinary things. So my story was I had started this business in the corner of my living room as a single mom without a college degree. And I grew it to $2.5 million. About half of that was through the acquisition. The other half was through contracts. And so with the acquisition of the other business, I also acquired a business partner. So part of the deal was, we'll sell you this business, which it came with the contracts that were still had some time left on them. One of the contracts had 3 years left on it. It was with the National Institute of Health, and we were running a clearinghouse for them. And so as you can imagine, going from 7 to 40 employees overnight was a bit overwhelming. It wasn't a part of the plan. At that point, whatever plan we had, Bill, we had jumped ship on that, and we were flying purely by the seat of our pants. But at the end of the day, what people saw was, wow, $2.5 million. This is fascinating. What in the world? And of course, you go on Oprah, and you're blessed with this kiss of success. And so when I returned from Oprah, the partner that I had really gone rogue on me and essentially was mismanaging things, mishandling customers. So I had pretty much become the marketing arm for the company. That's certainly one of my strengths. Sales was another strength I had acquired over the years, but it was really the authentic relationship building and really meeting customers where they were and providing them the services that they needed. And so we were vastly different. And as a result, to keep the story short, we had tremendous conflict. We called in the attorneys, and before we knew it, we were in a legal battle that caused us to dissolve this amazing business. Now, here we were about to be awarded $3.5 million more in government contracts, real time, plus we were in position to roll over additional work. So within 3 years, we were going to be a $10 million a year revenue generating company. Because we could not resolve our differences, I ended up dissolving the business, which is how I got to North Carolina. Next slide. So the real lesson I want to talk about tonight are the setbacks that happened to us that are not a part of the plan. Clearly, I wasn't planning on that. Heck, I was planning on retiring as a millionaire by the time I was 50 years old and living my dreams. And so it became quite tumultuous when you think about the plans that you made, because we did have some plans, although we weren't at the level of expertise, professionalism, or even just understanding some of the business fundamentals that were necessary. Of course, it caused a hardship on me and my family. And this situation really, I could have taken an extreme with and gone, depressed, which I had a moment of, deflated. I had a moment of that too. But what I realized, and my good friend Willie Jolly had come out with a book called "A Setback is a Setup for a Comeback." And so Willie gifted me the book, and of course he called and encouraged me. In fact, Willie was the first person I called when I was invited to go on Oprah. So to now have my dear friend encouraging me and saying, "Hey, read this book, you're gonna come back." And so what I say to you is, even when you get in business and things don't go as you plan, know that there's always a plan B, C, or D. And you may have to run the entire alphabet, but what I encourage you to do is, if you are really committed to the service you're providing, don't quit, don't give up. So I shifted. I was 40 years plus, so it was really a huge setback for me when I think about where I was trying to be. At the same time, there were some very valuable lessons I learned, and one of the greatest ones was, how do I stand on my faith and my principles and my values? So at the end of the day, this guy was embezzling money from the company. He was wrong. The challenge was the contract, the partnership agreement that we had. The terms for terminating that agreement were for cause, and those causes had to be proven. And so there wasn't ample time to prove those causes, because he filed a lawsuit against me for discrimination and a whole bunch of other things that cost the company money, it cost time, and he knew what he was doing, and frankly, he outsmarted me. So one of the most valuable lessons learned is that won't ever happen again, certainly, not to me. So just make sure you understand the importance of how to manage those setbacks when they come. And even though it was an unplanned setback, we still have to be able to have that tenacity and the ability to pick ourselves up and keep moving forward. And so again, setbacks are truly a setup for a comeback. And so I've been coming back for a long time, and I still am determined to get back to that level of success. And so I want to hopefully inspire you that just because you have a setback doesn't mean you have to take your toys and go home and stop playing. And so I had to shift. I had to re-educate myself. At that time, I didn't have a college degree. Now I have 3 college degrees, and I've taken practically every business course you can take. I encourage you that learning never stops. Being a lifelong learner is very important, regardless of what we do. But as entrepreneurs and business owners, you have to make the time, even if it means signing up for the session and going back and listening to it later because you weren't able to make the webinar real time. So I'll take that next slide, Jay. At the same time, we also have these obstacles, these things that hinder our progress. Some of it is in our heads and in our mindset when we think about the procrastination that we talked about early on. It shows up in the form of self-sabotage. It shows up in the form of, I'm a failure. And so one of the self-talks I had to give myself in that instance is that I wasn't a failure. I failed at that. And what can I learn from that failure? And how can I take that failure to, one, help other people not make that mistake? So one of the things, the reason why I coach and I volunteer my time with SCORE and other organizations, as well as continue to learn and grow, is because this story needs to be told. You need to understand the importance of how to operate our businesses. And what happens for many of us is we start these companies and we do it because it's a talent, it's a gift, it's a passion, it's that thing that we love to do. So we love to do that thing, we're good at it, and we're very passionate about it, but we also have to understand the operations of the business. Manager Monday, what did Oprah teach us? She looked at it she didn't care how much money she made, how rich she got. She was going to continue to look at her books. Well, one of the mistakes I made is I didn't. I was trusting this guy. He had been a very successful chief operating officer. He came with a DOD top secret clearance, and he talked a good talk, and my attorneys vetted this guy. He was a great guy. He was a crook though. And you don't see that. They look like us. And so I don't think there's anything I could have done to prevent what happened from happening. But one thing I could do is not let it hinder me from moving forward, not allowing it to hinder me from telling this story to educate other people. So I tell this story in classrooms, to students I teach, to up and coming entrepreneurs, not to frighten you, but to just make you aware that you can have the best laid plans and they can go awry, or you can be moving so quickly with your business that you're not taking time for the other parts. And so when we think about the mindfulness that we're getting as a part of this training each week, how can you incorporate that and integrate that? I wish I had the Sharon Sheltons and Darlene Thorns and Patty Williams of this group in my corner at that time. I wish I had the Bill Davises and Jay Graves in my corner at that time, because that balanced operations with leadership and marketing. So I was a very strong marketing person. So I wanted to stay over there where I was very comfortable and trusted someone who had another agenda. So just be mindful that just because setbacks come and obstacles come, it doesn't mean that we have to stop. We might just have to reinvent ourselves, which is what I did, and come back in a different way. And so I just want to help you understand, if this is your dream and it's in your heart, pursue it at all costs. And if it means staying up half the night and getting up early while you work another job to get there, it's worth it. And would I do it all over again? Absolutely, I would do it all over again. Jay, I'll take the next slide. And the reason I would do it all over again is because as entrepreneurs, there are risks. But in life, there are risks. There's no guarantee that we're going to wake up in the morning. And so we may as well live life to its fullest. And if that means, and your dream is to own and operate your own business for whatever purpose and passion that you've been called to do, at all costs, do it. Yes, it's going to expose you to some danger. It's going to expose you to some things that are over your head that you don't understand. But you have organizations like this, and then there's Wake Tech and all these other small business development resources. There's the Small Business Administration, and I could go on and on and on about all these organizations. And I want to pause here and applaud you for taking the time out to show up every evening, once a week for 13 weeks. This is a huge commitment. And I'm here to tell you it's worth it, because I have so many lessons learned. I'm working on that book, but I have so many lessons learned that I can share with other people about that experience. And the primary one I would tell you is do the work, stay the course, follow your plan. And when you get off course with your plan, shift back to your plan. Have accountability partners. They can be other entrepreneurs. They can be mentors like us. They can be other people out here. But here's another thing I want you to know. Whatever it is you're striving to be, you need to know at least one person who's doing that. So if your goal is to be a millionaire and you don't know a millionaire, chances are you're probably not going to get there. If you want to be a successful management consultant, go meet some other management consultants. Have coffee with Jay Graves and Bill Davis and other people in the community. Branch out. Don't be afraid to take even greater risk. And I remember some of my relatives said, why don't you just get a traditional job and quit trying to have your own business and struggling so hard? You know, you're a single mom and your daughters, you know, they need you. You never spend time with the family. And I had to explain to them, it's in my DNA. This is who I am. I'm not a JOB or a just over broker. And it's not about the money necessarily. Money is important. As Les Brown says, it's up there with oxygen. You got to have it to live. At the same time, it's about doing the things that we've been called to do. And so I feel that those experiences have prepared me for today and the business that I'm currently running. I'm having some tremendous success, even in the midst of COVID. And it's because I am following a plan. It's because I do have mentors. We're each other's mentors. And I got involved because of Patty Williams as my SCORE mentor, and she holds me accountable. I also have other mentors in my life who hold me accountable. And sometimes still I make mistakes, but I'm not a failure. I'm a work in progress. I'm a successful entrepreneur who is going to keep doing it until I get it right. And right for me now is helping other people to not make some of the same mistakes I made or some of the mistakes that I've seen others make. And remember what I say about mistakes. Those are the decisions we make. So we make a choice. I made a choice to acquire that company. I made a choice to bring that partner on board. And so the decision, it didn't come out the way I had planned. So it's a valuable lesson learned and a choice that I hold myself accountable for. And I would have made it all over again because I believe it was a part of my journey to grow and become who I am, to test my perseverance and my tenacity and to prove my stewardship over where I am. Next slide, Jay. And so when I think about that, I also want to speak about this fear thing. It's huge for entrepreneurs and when we think about the risk. So telling this story, I've had people say, oh my God, do I really want to do this? Yes, you do. You want to stay the course because if you don't, you might take those gifts and talents that are within you to the place where most of the talent is today, and that's at the cemetery. And there are too many people out here who need you, who need your gifts and talents and your resources, who need to hear your stories, who need to benefit from your products. So just remember, fear is really stepping out on faith, and it's false evidence appearing real, because when we step back and assess where that fear is coming from, it's coming from those little gremlins or that self-doubt that sometimes we get caught up on because things didn't go as we planned. So I encourage you to replace your fear with faith and to believe in yourself. And when you don't believe in yourself, surround yourself with people who do believe in themselves. Go to the courses that are necessary for you to be better. Take the time to get educated. Do not trust anyone with your money and your books, period. And if you don't know how to read them, take them to someone else, a third party. You know, I ended up bringing in a outside auditor to assess the books. And that's how we found out that this guy was embezzling money from the company. So we have to be smart about how we run our businesses. And most importantly, we can't let fear or failure or a setback cause us to no longer move forward with that dream. So I'm still living that dream. I'm a better person for it. And I definitely lead everything I do by faith. Fear has no place in my heart, in my head, in my habits, in my hands, or in my habits. Next slide, Jay. And so when we think about that, and I've even had relatives, some of them, I adore them, but they're dream busters. But I've had them say to me, but you're going to fail again. And look at all the money you lost. And what if you were to take that money and put it in the stock market or some investment? I said, and play it safe like you and still be broke like you. And I say it with the love of my family, but I just want you to know that you can do this. And it's this thing called Failing Forward. If you haven't read this book by John Maxwell, one of my favorite leadership authors, it's a tremendous story about how to fail forward. And it's simply this: get up, brush yourself off, go ahead, lick those wounds. I licked my wounds for about 7 months. I nicknamed myself Jobette. For those of you who know the story of Job in the Bible, I felt like I had been cursed and I had lost everything. But guess what I remembered? I never lost my soul. And at the end of the day, all we have is our stories and who we are in terms of our character and our words. I never lost my word. Most importantly, I found the best attorneys that I could find. And we ended up dissolving that business without filing a bankruptcy and returning all the government funds that we were escrowing for them back to them. The contracts that we had, those multi-million-dollar contracts, were novated over to my formidable competitors who were able to take those employees with them. So I was able to sleep good at night because these people continue to have a job. And my colleagues and fellow entrepreneurs and business owners had contracts that they were able to take on. And I was able to spend some time working on me and understanding how to overcome that setback so that I can make that comeback. So I encourage you, fail forward, stay the course, and never quit. Last slide. So these are some of the lessons learned for me is know thyself. I would also tell you to know what enough is. So one question I was asked, and I pondered this, is what would have happened had you not acquired that business and brought that partner on? We'll never know because we didn't do that. And we would have played it safe, and I would not have had the experience of acquiring a business. I would not have had the experience of going on the Oprah Winfrey Show. I would have not have had the experience of knowing how important it was for me to go back to school and complete my education. So I have a bachelor in science in business administration and management from Shaw University. Shaw U, you know. I also have a master's degree in business from the George Washington University, and I have a doctorate in strategic leadership from Regent University. And so now I take all of that education and I coach clients, small business owners, leaders on how to manage through their own risk, how to make those critical thinking decisions, how to continue to step out on faith and overcome the fear or the setbacks that have come from their own failures, and how to turn them into valuable lessons learned, and how to get over having a pity party. Who has time for a pity party? And I'm not saying don't pause and feel the moment and be in the moment of the loss. It was very traumatizing for me. The saddest part was when my then 10-year-old daughter told me that she was looking forward to living a life of growing up rich. And now I have to be poor again. And I tell her, and now she tells me, she's 30 now, you're a better woman for it, kid. Go find your own riches. And she is. She's a Broadway performer and doing exceptionally well. And my other daughter is an artist and an author and doing well. So we also have to understand we're role models for other people, and we're leading by example, regardless of what we say or do. So with that said, these are some of the lessons learned that I thought I'd share with you tonight. So we can try our best to mitigate risk. We can use the tools and techniques. And please, whatever you do, send your assignments back to Bill and Jay each week to take that feedback. It's a gift. It's free. It's a free gift. And we can only do better when we know better. And that's where the lessons come from and the feedback. So I encourage you, stay the course. Thank you for this opportunity to share a part of my story with you. And I'll take any questions at this time, if there are any. Next slide, Jay. Do you have an advice or bullet point for us on how to select a business partner and get large-scale business sales? Let me take this part first. I would say having a business partner is like a marriage. It definitely has to be someone that you can trust, and it also has to be someone that's like-minded, someone who thinks like you, someone who you believe is going in the same direction as you, and someone who has a proven track record. So that would be my guidance on that. And get large-scale business sales. To get large-scale business sales really is all about following your business plan, doing the work for your target marketing. The work that you get, do it to your fullest. And so I encourage you, stay the course, understand it, rework it. Someone asked earlier, I think it was Lillian Thompson, that asked you, Bill, or made the comment, hey, I'm in this business now. Should I do a SWOT? It's never too late to go back and get it right. So following the plan is critical. And if you shift from the plan, you can go back to it, but don't abandon it, would be a lesson learned. How you handle bigger size federal projects without having the personnel to do them initially. You work from faint to faint in the beginning, literally, and you expand, and you have to be not afraid to not make all the money yourself. So you're going to have to hire people, and you're going to have to hire good people. And I'm going to tell you one lesson learned is this thing it's called capacity. So the capacity that you have to manage your business now versus the future, of course, is very different. At the same time, what happens to many entrepreneurs is we don't grow businesses to sell them. We grow them to hold on to them. Grow that business to sell it. And Patty shared with us the other week, she made a whole bunch of money selling a business not long ago. But don't be so closely knitted to it that you can't let it go, because you can create another business, which is what she's doing now. She's creating lots of businesses with other people. So it really is all about the risk you're willing to take and the understanding that you're going to win some and you're going to lose some, but you're never a loser. I'll take one last question. So Omar said, great point, grow to sell. Yes, start small and grow tall is one thing that we teach in our organization, and know that the sky really is the limit, and it may not happen overnight. It might take years before you get to where you're trying to go, but does it really matter as long as you get there? And remember, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey and the things you learn along the way. It's also about the many celebrations. I worked so hard during those days. I worked 365, 7 days a week, 18 hours a day for 3 years. And what did I end up with? A failed marriage as well, because I was never home to support that. So there are just so many lessons learned that are critical. Yes, there is a fear of hiring the wrong people, but you can fire them as well. That's the beauty of you see Patty applauding? That's the beauty of it. So when you see it, just don't overlook it. Handle it real time. Give the feedback. Be a boss man or a boss lady, and be willing to call someone in and say, hey, you're not delivering, and I need you to deliver this. Be real clear. Take the time to know the work and how to do it yourself, because then you know how long it takes and what it takes. So when someone tells you it takes 20 hours to do a job that you know takes 5, you know what you're dealing with. This last question, and I'm going to pass it to the next person. Does any of the SCORE mentors have experience with growing business systems in order to build a business that can function on its own? Absolutely. All of us have that to some degree, depending on what type of business, etc. So I would encourage you to go out to the SCORE website, raleigh.score.org, and search a mentor. We can match you based on what you're looking for. You can find several mentors who have expertise in your area of business and select one. And if that one's not a good match for you, you can select another, and you can have more than one. I'm going to pause here. Patty would like to step in and make a comment.
And I would like to say that I don't know of a business that is going to run on its own. There's going to have to be some form of management or some control structure, because say if you do get it set up and everything runs like clockwork, what if you don't watch the books the way you should? What if the environment changes and someone needs to step in, like the things that Dr. Angie told us and Bill just talked to us about? So there's just a level of running on its own. But, we can talk through that further, and one of the round tables might be a good time for you to come so we can really expound on that. But it makes me a little nervous about a business running on its own, because someone may come in and scoop it right from under you. And Dr. Angie just gave us a great analogy and a story about how she was able to navigate through that and the things that happened to her. And when she told me her story last year, I was almost holding my breath because I couldn't believe what she had gone through, and I was so angry at her partner. I would have been a whole lot harder to handle in that situation. But so you want to maintain some type of oversight of your business if it's yours. It's good to bring in good people, let them do what they do, but you always want to have a certain amount of control or someone you can trust, like Dr. Angie said, almost like a marriage. They have your values, they're everything you want them to be, and then you can let go. But Bill, that would be a good one for us in a round table, and we can take that on.
There was a mentor of mine when I first left the military and went into corporate, and I went into leadership. You know, I was used to the military where you really can't fire anybody; you can only manage them, right? And so that's the mentality that I had as a new leader in corporate. And so I took over an underperforming team, and I did a pretty good job of assessing the strengths and the capabilities and kind of matching people where they needed to be in the team and leveraging that. But there were certainly people on that team that at the end of the day, my heart, I knew needed to go, but I just kept trying to train them. That's how I was trained, you know, try to train them. I was more invested in their career than they were. I mean, I was putting more work into their career than they were. And finally, a mentor of mine said, hey, you know, I was telling about the team, and they said something simple that stuck with me. And they said, hire slow, fire fast.
Right.
If somebody gets to the point where you've extended them the olive branch and you've identified that maybe it's something in training that they need, and you extend that to them as a leader or as a business owner, and they don't take the initiative for that, don't own it for them, get rid of it. And a lot of people, unfortunately, they'll rather hang on to underperforming employees out of the fear of being able to have an open position or not being able to find somebody or anything like that. And so, you know, what I realized early on, thankfully early in my career, is that mentality of hire slow, fire fast. And it was really vetting people, taking the time, don't have the pressure on top of me to say, oh my gosh, you know, for every 30 days that this is open, I'm losing sales. You know, that was my concern. And I was, you know, I had metrics behind it, but I took a pause and I took this mantra to heart throughout my career. And it really helped me build phenomenal teams throughout my time. And so, you know, I just want to share that, as, you know, I see comments in here and having a hard time finding, you know, part-time people. It's okay. You know, take your time, have your mission and your vision and the attributes that you want to see in your employees, and stick to that. They're out there. And yeah, sometimes it takes time and sometimes it's hard to find them. Sometimes you have to be creative on how to go find them, but take the time to do that. And then if you do find that you have a partner that is just an anchor, or an employee that's an anchor to your business, they'll do way more harm, as you can see by this example that Dr. Angie just shared, than good. So I just wanted to share that, because for me, that was a pretty key piece of guidance that I got from a great mentor.
Well, thank you, Patty and Jay. I want to close with, I saw a comment in here about a SCORE mentor not having good fortune with SCORE over the last several years. Part of why Patty started this business plan model that we're going through now is to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the individuals here. So feel free to circle back to either Patty or myself specifically, or go to the website and send us a note. But we're here to help you, and we're here to not only help you grow your business, but to encourage you. And this mindfulness that you're about to hear is going to be a tremendous blessing to you. Yes, Lillian, come back for a better match. Oh, that's Patty writing that. Absolutely. And I would also say, one of the things that I'm doing in this current business is I'm hiring other entrepreneurs and small business owners as sub-consultants and subcontractors. And so the model that I've created for me is to hire other businesses. I'm thinking about the whole entrepreneurial economic development engine that my company can be to these businesses. It's working really well for me. We also gave some resources early on about some places that you can find some part-time temporary help. And maybe that's the way, is to try someone out over a period of time and see, like, I have 2 people now that I would love to hire permanently when the time comes. So just know that there are so many options available for you. And I love Dr. Burdell, find the right bus, etc. So with that said, I'm going to pause and shift back to my colleague who is going to take us through some mindfulness for the remainder of the session.
So I think now is a really good time to talk about mindfulness. You know, hearing Dr. Angie's story and the ways in which she responded, right? So many others would have responded differently by telling themselves different stories, which they would have let stop them in their tracks. So it's a beautiful example of why it's so important to manage your mind and to pay attention to these choice points where you have a choice to entertain thoughts around, I'm a failure, or you have a choice to entertain thoughts around, what can I learn from this and where am I going to go from here? So the challenge is the choice point, right? So that's where mindfulness can really be super supportive. So next slide, Jay. So I love this quote by John Kabat-Zinn. He's an early pioneer of bringing mindfulness to the West. And he says, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. So Dr. Angie exhibited this perfectly. 2020 has exhibited this perfectly, that particularly as business owners and entrepreneurs, the nature of our business and our life is waves, right? And so as opposed to expending energy and effort and resources on trying to stop the waves, trying to control things not happening, like Dr. Angie saying, how could she have known, right? And economic conditions are changing, you know, outside of our control. And so instead of obsessing about trying to control the outer conditions, trying to stop the waves from happening, we practice surfing. We figure out what tools can support us in navigating those waves and getting back on the surfboard when we fall off, and staying flexible and staying aware and paying attention to what is happening within and without, so that we can surf the wave while we actually stay focused on the direction that we're heading in. That's the intention piece that I talked about. So next slide, Jay. So I talked about the choice points, and this is really where, this is the secret sauce in a lot of this stuff that I've been sharing and Darlene has been sharing as well, because we talk a lot about intention and knowing your why and staying in alignment with that intention, managing your mind to manifest that intention. But unless you're noticing when you have a choice to stay in alignment and when you have a choice to stay out of alignment, and when you're out of alignment, get back into alignment as soon as possible, then you'll go weeks, months, and years not realizing the damage it's doing to yourself personally, or your business, or your relationships, or your finances, because you're missing the choice points because you're perpetually operating on autopilot. And so when we don't notice those choice points, it's hard to build consistent habits of either thought or action. It's hard to build momentum, right? Because constant distraction, especially now, make it really difficult to notice the choice points. There's a lot of noise, and there are people who are profiting off of our distraction. And so they're working really hard to distract us. So we need as many tools in our toolbox to reclaim our attention so that we can live more deliberate lives, because otherwise we end up just kind of doing things on autopilot. And remember, I talked about negativity bias, and we have these old outdated 8-track tapes around our capabilities, or whether we're good enough, or whether we're this enough, or whether we're that enough. A lot of these stories we've developed ourselves because of our own experiences, but a lot of times these stories have been passed down to us, or we've just assumed from the culture. And so if we're not bringing some awareness to our internal dialogue and to the moves that we're making as a result, then our lives are just being lived on autopilot, and that produces a lot of reactivity and a lot of lack of resilience, right? So the key is to reclaim our attention, to pay attention so that we can notice what those choice points are. Now that we've talked about what we want our businesses to be about, and we've identified, what alignment would look like, what we have to do on a regular basis, what we'd have to think on a regular basis, we have to notice when we have the opportunity to do that. So mindfulness practice, in addition to compassion, because it's important to be aware of what our current experience is, but if we're continuously judging ourselves for it, then that's not helpful, right? So we have to bring a level of compassion to what we're noticing as well, because that supports alignment, because then we can fold all of our experience, the setbacks and the obstacles and what we've learned, as Dr. Angie so eloquently described, her learnings from that whole experience. We can fold that into the next moves we make. That's wisdom. And so paying attention supports integrating that wisdom so that our actions can be more skillful going forward. So really, mindfulness is really the enabler for all of this stuff that we've been talking about. So next slide, Jay. I love this quote by Viktor Frankl. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he says, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." So again, we cannot always control what happens to us, but there's a space between our reaction and the circumstance where we have all of our power. And if we can cultivate an awareness is a skill, it's a muscle, just like any other muscle or skill. The more we practice, the better we get at it. If we can cultivate an awareness of that space, then our actions come out of a much more skillful, much more deliberate, much wiser place. And so that's really what mindfulness is about. And if you read his story, it's extraordinary what he was able to endure and how he managed his mind around that. It's really phenomenal. But that's really what I'm talking about with mindfulness. Next slide, Jay. And so why bother? I work with a lot of folks, C-level, I coach and consult with a lot of folks in the C-suite, and, they're often about the bottom line, let's go, let's go. They don't necessarily want to talk about some of this seemingly soft stuff, although it's changing now. Mindful leadership is becoming a really important thing right now. So, when I talk about this, these are the reasons why it matters. Why should we bother cultivating this ability to be more intentional in our lives? Well, it increases self-awareness, increases clarity and emotional intelligence, which is very important because, being entrepreneurs and business owners, we are subject to a lot of different stressors. And oftentimes, if we let our emotions go unchecked, we can take ourselves out without anybody's help. So emotional intelligence becomes very important to cultivate. And it trains us to pay attention, as I was saying, instead of being on autopilot. It helps us to see whether our actions are coming from a beneficial place or they're coming from a harmful place. It could be something simple as noticing, whether it's a good idea to spend 2 hours on social media as opposed to, spending 2 hours on developing a SWOT analysis. And if you're not aware of where that impulse is coming from, you're liable to just go on autopilot. 2 hours later, you've realized you've lost 2 hours, and because you weren't paying attention to where that impulse was coming from. And then we can cultivate beneficial mind states. It's kind of like your mind is a garden. You know, you have weeds in there. We all have some weeds, and we have some beautiful flower thoughts. So really, this is about how do we intentionally cultivate beneficial mind states, like Dr. Angie was saying, mind states around what can I learn from this, or I will survive this, or it's, you know, it's in my blood, I will be successful, I'm modeling this for my girls. The beneficial mind states, and weed out the mind states that say, you know, is never going to work, I'll never recover, all those mind states that we're all familiar with, that happen to all of us. So mindfulness really allows us to notice what's happening up here, and again, take care of our garden, right? And with mindfulness practice, that fight or flight part of our brain, that amygdala, becomes less reactive, because, you know, in challenging situations, we don't feel as threatened. We're not as triggered because we're taking that pause, creating that space, right? And so in that way, it can kind of counteract that negativity bias that we all have, as opposed to just panicking and reacting in a way that may not be helpful, because we're scared, because we're afraid of what's going to happen. We can pause, and we can look at the situation with more wiser eyes, from a more spacious posture, and then different ideas may become available in that space. Different resources you hadn't thought about may become available in that space, but you have to create the space. Next slide, Jay. So what is mindfulness? Hit me, Jay. There we go. So it's a simple practice, not always easy, right, Darlene? But it's a simple practice. It's purely paying attention to the present moment on purpose, without judgment. It's noticing whatever is actually happening internally and externally in the present moment. So we're really training our mind to just not be going off on autopilot all the time, constantly reacting to one thought after the next. And so it's just like going to the gym. In the same way we exercise our body to be toned and flexible and fit, responsive, we can exercise our mind to work for us as opposed to against us. And so the purpose of mindfulness is really to strengthen our capacity to experience things just as they are, without the filter of all that negative thinking, or all the evaluation, or all that habitual reactivity. Just noticing what is. And so it's also a practice that cultivates all these yummy qualities that I believe are inherent to all of us, for some of us, they're just really hidden, but I think they're inherent to all of us, this capacity for presence and ease and compassion and open-heartedness, and wisdom that arises in that space. We all have that capacity. This practice is about cultivating that capacity so that it expresses in our lives. So that's kind of what it is. The next slide, Jay. What it's not is, it's not just a relaxation exercise, although some folks use it for that. I mean, there's a reason why sports teams have mindfulness coaches. There's a reason why Michael Jordan, attributed it to his success, why Kobe Bryant attributed it to his success, why major baseball teams and college teams now have mindfulness teachers and coaches and mentors on staff, because it is just that powerful. So it's not just a relaxation exercise. Again, it's this practice to notice what's happening in the present moment, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. It's not a quick fix. So it's not like you're going to practice mindfulness or practice meditation and all of a sudden all your decisions are going to be skillful. It's a practice that unfolds over time, right? There's this cumulative effect. It's kind of like compound interest, why I love compound interest. It may not seem like, a small amount of money matters in the moment, but you continuously, consistently invest a small amount of money over time is going to add up. So mindfulness works the same way. It's not about doing a half an hour every day right out the bat. It's about 3 to 5 minutes every day consistently. And it builds this muscle of being able to pay attention before you let your reactive mind go off and run the show. So it has this beautiful cumulative effect. It's not this trendy technique. I know everybody's talking about it, but it's not a trendy technique. It's evidence-based. It has proven benefits, and it can really become a way of life. It's also not a religion, although it's derived from ancient Buddhist tradition, which is thousands of years old. It's more philosophy about life. So that's what it's not. Next slide, Jay. Again, I mentioned the evidence-based benefits. Now that we have the technology, the brain scanning technology to see what's happening up in the brain, and they've done a lot of studies on long-time meditators, on monks, and all kinds of stuff, and they've been able to quantify these benefits. Reduced rumination, that's that constant thinking over and over again. It reduces stress. It boosts our working memory. We're able to better focus. We have less emotional reactivity, more cognitive flexibility. These are all things we need as business owners and entrepreneurs. More relationship satisfaction because we're more present. We're not responding to who they used to be. We're responding to who they are in front of us. More self-insight, better access to your intuition, a greater ability to modulate your fear, right? So, and these are evidence-based benefits. These are just not anecdotal benefits, although I have experienced many of these myself. And there's a link down there, and there's a bunch of studies that you can find on the benefits of mindfulness meditation. Next slide, Jay. And so why does it matter to us, really? And so mindfulness, I'm all about toolkit. I'm all about the toolkit. So my mentors are my toolkit, my coach is my toolkit, mindfulness is my toolkit, exercise is in my toolkit. I have a toolkit that sustains me. And mindfulness can be part of a self-care routine. I know self-care has gotten a bad rap, but it can really be part of a routine that you adopt to make sure you're operating optimally. And importantly, it can be an antidote to burnout, which can sneak up on us as a result of exhaustion that can happen sometimes for entrepreneurs and business owners. And when you add mindfulness and compassion, these are ways for us to build resilience in these stressful environments. Because again, stressful environments are going to be part of the deal, right? So mindfulness can also make space for difficult emotions, right? It can make space for doubt to be there without doubt running the show. It can make space for regret to even be there without regret running the show, as opposed to learning from it. So mindfulness can make space for all of your difficult emotions without causing you to stop. So you can respond as opposed to react. We have the stressors of working with all these different stakeholders, funders, customers, partners, contractors, subcontractors. We're building and managing our business. So we need to be able to make skillful actions that are born of wisdom. So we need to tap into our resources as much as we possibly can. And again, mindfulness and compassion, they can help you maintain alignment with what's most important to you. We talked about how important it is to set intentions. So, the why. So it's so important for you. If you fall off the surfboard, mindfulness and compassion can help you get back on the surfboard as soon as possible. Reorient yourself so that you can pivot as things change as quickly as possible. So it matters. Next slide. And so how do we do it? So several disciplines cultivate mindfulness. Yoga is a great practice. Tai Chi, Qigong, martial arts certain martial arts are great for cultivating mindfulness. But most of the research that I talked about and a lot of the programming that you'll hear about, they really focus on mindfulness meditation, just so you know that. And so mindfulness meditation is really about how we find an anchor to the present moment. So that's really part of it. We need to find something that we can return to, because our minds are always going to go off. We need to find something that we can return to and anchor ourselves into the present moment. And the more common anchor is the breath. That's the most common anchor that you'll hear about, because the breath is always with us. It's just easiest to access. It's easiest to talk about. It's what I use oftentimes. Sometimes I use sound as well. But the key is to find an anchor to the present moment. And you can insert these short pauses into your everyday life. When I was driving a lot before COVID, I would take 3 deep breaths at every red light. And what that did, again, it was an exercise to cultivate my ability to be in the present moment. Right? So short pauses throughout the day, in addition to the formal sitting practice. I'm a big fan of formal sitting because I think it supports everything else. But I'm just as much of a fan of informal practice, practicing mindfulness when you're folding clothes, practicing mindfulness when you're eating, or when you're walking, or when you're in conversation with someone, instead of preparing what you're going to say next, to really listen. When you're speaking, to slow down and practice being mindful of your speech. So these are all ways that we can practice mindfulness. Again, it's really about how do we bring our attention back to the present moment, away from discursive thinking, so that we can be more familiar with that space where wisdom lives, where insight lives. And anybody can do it, regardless of belief system. Anybody can do it. So next slide, Jay. And I talked a lot about self-compassion. I'm a huge fan of self-compassion because, one of the favorite things I've noticed folks do, I've had my business for over 10 years, and we're really good at beating up on ourselves. We're really good at noticing what's wrong or what could go wrong. Partially because of the negativity bias, partially because of the culture. The culture profits off of us thinking something's wrong with us, so we need something, right? Partially because of the environments that we've grown up in, that self-compassion is something that doesn't come naturally to a lot of us. So it's a really beneficial practice to engage in. And so Christian Neff, she's a researcher and an author that I have a lot of respect for. She expresses self-compassion as composed of 3 parts: self-kindness, so being kind to ourselves, not berating ourselves because we didn't know something. Common humanity, so that's the recognition that we all struggle, we all suffer, all of us. No one escapes suffering. So there's a commonality that we can rest in and really ease up off of ourselves when we're struggling. And then mindfulness is the recognition of how you're being with yourself in the moment. Because, again, life is hard. For some folks harder than others. And we're all going to have those moments where they're challenging, like Dr. Angie described. But if we can meet those moments with a compassionate response, with kindness, with courage, it can really transform our ability to meet these difficulties and transform them into something that changes us for the better. Right? It's not self-indulgent when we say we're being self-compassionate. I happen to think self-compassion is the most selfless thing you can do, because it provides inner resources for you to be able to offer to folks as well. More compassion we have for ourselves and for others, the more courageous and resilient we can be. So when you couple mindfulness practice, this ability to pay attention to the present moment, along with compassion, this ability to be kind to yourself for whatever arises, that's a winning deal right there, right? Because it's about knowing, it's about running your business. It's also about how you're being in your business, just as important. Next slide. All right, so I know some of y'all thinking, coming up with some excuses. I hear them all the time. And these are some of the favorites. Not enough time. Again, start small. 3 minutes, 2 minutes. Start small and then build up. Again, there's this compounding effect. A lot of folks won't keep a practice going because they think they're not doing it right. You know, and my invitation is to ease up on attachment to outcome. There's no bright lights that are going to go off, or this is just a practice and you're just paying attention to whatever's going on. So ease off the attachment or the efforting or the doing of mindfulness and just practice being mindful. I'm too distracted. So there's always going to be distractions. Distractions are never going to stop because we have these minds. So this is really about cultivating a way of being with them instead of fighting them or trying to control them. It's cultivating a way of being with the distractions so that we don't become run by them. Another one, it's not working. And again, this takes ongoing practice and commitment. And again, it's really counter to this culture of inadequacy, that we need something outside of ourselves all the time to know what to do. When oftentimes it's just simply pausing long enough to hear our own wisdom based on our experience, based on our skill set, based on our passion, based on the information we've accumulated to that point. So it takes practice. It's too hard. And, you know, even the most enlightened folks that I've met, folks who've been meditating for 30 years, and it became very apparent this year, they all have to deal with difficult situations and chaotic thoughts, right? The difference is they're not special. The folks you see who seem to have some equanimity, who seem to find some ease, it's not because they don't have these crazy minds. It's just they relate to those minds differently. That's the difference. They're no different or special than us. They just relate to their experience. They relate to their setbacks. They relate to their obstacles. They relate to their mind differently. They actively manage their mind and they cultivate these skills that I've been talking about, the skill of paying attention, the skill of compassion. They practice that because again, the more you practice anything, the better you're going to get at it. So be real deliberate about what you're practicing. Another comment I get is that it feels selfish. You know, I have kids and I have my business and I have this, and how could I take 5 minutes to just sit and do nothing? And, you know, my invitation is that in this way, you can give from a full cup and then everybody benefits. Because when you get burnt out, it's hard to continue serving. And your service comes out of a burnt out place as opposed to coming out of a full, resilient place. Yeah, so those are the excuse busters. Next slide. How are we doing on time? Okay, to sum it up, and then we're going to do a tiny bit of practice just to kind of give you a taste. Again, mindfulness, in mindfulness practice, you can use the breath, or you can use sound, or you can use a sensation in your body. I used it before we got on this call, or Dr. Angie helped me because I was having a really hectic day. And so I arrived to the call in a bit of a frenzy. And Dr. Angie picked up on the fact that I needed to come back to the present moment. And so she invited us to take a few breaths and stop and take a few breaths. And that was exactly what I needed. So it could be just something that simple. You know, I'm a founding advisor on a new company and a consultant and a teacher with this new company that we launched a couple of weeks ago. And we launched it with, it's a mindfulness mentoring program. We launched it with 45 seats, and we launched it not knowing, we were hoping we would fill one of the groups. Well, we got 200 people wanting to sign up, and we got 320 people on a waiting list. And so it's a desirable problem to have, but it's still a problem. It's a high-class problem, but it's still a problem. So I was having all kinds of anxiety about it, and the way I would normally respond is to just kind of overcommit, because I was being asked to do a little bit more in response to this, move some things up. And typically I would have just overcommitted, and that's how I would have responded to the anxiety. But instead I paused and I said, what am I telling myself that's making me anxious? Because remember, I said situation, and you have thoughts about it. Those thoughts create your emotions, and those emotions create your actions and your results. So I was feeling anxious. So I had to back it up. What am I thinking? So what I was thinking is that, oh, I'm going to be overextended again. And what are we going to do? And, oh, we should have anticipated this. And, but this is great. But wait, we have to this now. Our system's ready. I was spinning out. So I said, well, what other thoughts are available to me? What other thoughts are available to me? Oh, okay. So I can look at everything I have on my plate, which is what I did. I got out my whiteboard. I can look at everything I have on my plate and see what I can let go of, or see what I can delegate, because I have 2 contractors who work for me. See what I can delegate. And that's what I did. So I had to let go of something that I really wanted to do, temporarily let go of it. And I offloaded some administrative stuff to one of my contractors. And I focused on, well, what things are the most important to me personally and to my business? For example, this was something that I would refuse to let go of because it's important to me. And so I was like, oh, when I did that, it freed up some space, I reshuffled things. And so now we're good, you know? And the reason I was able to do that, as opposed to just habitually just trying to figure it all out, is because I have developed a practice of managing my mind and being able to see what's a skillful thought pattern to go down and what's unskillful. The anxiety wasn't serving me. There was no upside. So I had to say what else is available, and then focus on thoughts that would serve me. And that's exactly what happened. So that's just an example of how the practice can be helpful right in the moment. But again, it's just a tool that can bring us back to the present moment, regardless of the situation we find ourselves in. You can practice this anywhere. You can practice it in the bathroom. You can practice it walking from room to room. You can practice it. Oftentimes I'll practice it. I did it this morning, actually, when I went to the doctor. Right when I pulled into the parking lot, I paused right there, and I just sat and I gathered myself. And then I got out. So I pepper these moments throughout my day so that I become a more mindful person, right? And we can use cues to bring our attention back to our breath in any given moment. I'll use my phone a lot as a reminder to say, take a breath, take a breath. And again, in this way, we're training our attention so that we're not just running on autopilot, and we're really tapping this inherent ability we have to find ease, to find calm, to find steadiness, regardless of the outer situation. And then from there, we can take more skillful action. So next slide. Oh, yes. Oh, and I'm sorry. Important to this also is to find some support and maybe establish some accountability. You know, maybe you talk to a friend, or maybe you join a group online who meditates. There's so many groups out there that are meditating online all over the world, and to tap into a group where you can practice being more mindful. It's a great way to build the skill. And there's an app that I've used for years. It's a free app. It's called Insight Timer. And it's, the reason I like it is for a few reasons. One is if you're anything like me and you like streaks, if you like to see your progress, it allows you to do that. It also allows you, if you choose, for example, I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes, it also lets you see who else around the world is meditating with you at that same time, which I think is beautiful. It also has meditations for any particular purpose, for sleep, for anxiety, for pain, for all kinds of things. And it has 3 minutes all the way up to an hour, and you can just set it. And it's a beautiful tool, again, in your toolbox that can support a mindful practice. Okay, now next slide, I think. So I was going to do, it's late, so I'm wondering if I'm going to lose people if I do a 3-minute practice. So yeah, I think I'm going to pass on that in lieu of maybe some questions that might come up. So again, there's lots of talk about mindful leaders. And some of the biggest corporations are now talking about how they can bring mindfulness into their leadership, because they're realizing that more mindful leaders are better leaders. They make better decisions. They're more resilient. They're more compassionate with their teams. They're not just extracting from their staff. They're adding to their staff. They listen better. They're more compassionate, non-judgmental. They're more they respond better from failure, right? So I don't know if I want to say this is leading edge kind of stuff, but I mean, if you can become a more mindful leader in your own life and in your business, that will be a differentiator. That can be part of your secret sauce. And so I'm really encouraging you to consider that. So next slide. I don't know if I have. Oh, yes. Okay, so I have a practice. So just 3 questions. So, and I invite you to write about it or journal about it, or even just think about it. But 1, how might a more mindful you show up differently in your life and in your business? If you cultivated this practice, this skill that I've been describing, what might change in your life? How might it be different? What might change in your business? How might you be able to make business decisions? How might you be able to recover from challenging moments in your business? Number 2, how might you integrate this practice into your life? And I'm big on 80-20. Nobody's going to do everything all the time. But if you can do it the majority of the time, how might you integrate this practice into your life? Is it a couple minutes in the morning? Is it in the shower, noticing how the sensation of the water on your body? Is it using the app? How might you integrate it into your life? And then what resources and communities might be able to support you? Is there friends? Is there a Facebook group that you might be able to tap in? Is there a meetup? There's lots of meditation meetups happening right now. So what resources can support you? Because again, this is simple but not easy. So we need each other. So I think that's all I had around mindfulness. I'll open it up to any questions folks may have. Or Darlene?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on 2 things that you did speak on, and I just wanted to encourage everyone. You spoke about mindfulness in eating, and I really wanted to kind of encourage us that when we're eating, it's real important to be mindful about that. Not only what you're eating, but how you're eating and when you choose to eat, because that really can play a role in how you continue to show up for the rest of the day. Because
Absolutely.
you're not choosing, first of all, the right foods. And then if you don't have enough time to mindfully eat, to enjoy the food, because food, we're not supposed to live to eat, but we're supposed to eat to live. And so we want that to be something that's going to continue to give us life so that we'll be able to function well. So I just want to encourage you that when you choose to eat mindfully and be very cognizant of what you're consuming and how you're consuming it. You know, we talk about drinking water. Jay talked about that earlier in the classes, you know, how important it was. We were talking about drinking water and stuff, but these are things that really help you to present yourself as your best when you're dealing with business and how you're building business. And the other thing is just be consistent. And just like you talked about 80-20, as much as lies within you, be as consistent be as consistent as you can, because one thing that you learn, the way to really build a habit, people say 21 days, but really if you think about it, it's like about 66 days, 21 days times 3 to really build a habit that becomes a part of you. So if you're able to begin to switch some things around, that will really help you in other areas of your life because it folds over into other things. But I just wanted to kind of touch on those couple of things to add. But
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real quick because I know we have some comments here that Sharon would be good to look
Okay.
at and address. But you know, I have a quick story. So when I was head of sales at Roche, they decided to go to the open office, right? And I had already done that. I had already moved out of my office because I'm a people person. So I just tore down all the cube farm that they had around my office and moved out with everybody. But they made it official and they brought in, you know, plants, and we have wellness people come in. And you know, my wife's a massage therapist, so I've been around kind of the wellness and mindfulness culture for a while. And one of the things that we I asked to be done was to turn one of the rooms into a quiet room and a meditation room. And we brought in people that would lead sessions. And I have to admit, you know, most people were laughing. You know, they were giving me a really hard time. When I brought my sales folks together for our national sales meeting, you had about 600 people, 700 people in this building. And I decided that during the breakout sessions, I would have a mindfulness room. And we had like a massage therapy room, and we had a quiet room. We had incense. We had all this, you know, breathing techniques and everything that I brought in. And we trained the sales team how to take that back with them. And everybody stopped joking around after they started to actually see, and here's where I want to link this back to business. When they started to see the performance of the people and the comments that people would say before they were going into a really tough sales call, that they would do breathing techniques that they learned, they would center themselves. People all of a sudden in the office who would walk by that room and kind of snicker at it, all of a sudden you would see that they would be in there getting some time to center themselves before a big presentation. And then the next thing we know, the CEO is like, hey, let's take a minute before we have our staff meetings just to make sure that we're focused and everything. And he starts going through the exercises, and all of a sudden it became a part of our culture there. But we actually saw the business outcome of it. We saw more productivity. We saw more engagement in the field. So, you know, some people, and I think you mentioned, you know, this soft skills sometimes in business, people would, you know, kind of, you know, poo-poo at, you know, and say, well, it's all about the numbers and it's all about this. And they started realizing those soft skills, when you're talking about people, because organizations run on people, realize the power behind doing these exercises and integrating this into your culture. So I just wanted to add that really quick. And then I know we're running late, so I want
Jay, that's such a good point, though, because I just, and I think it's more important these days. These soft skills are more important now because the internet has leveled the playing field, right? So to find a differentiator has gotten so hard. So the differentiator has become how you treat people. Do people want to do business with you? Do people trust you? Do people feel at ease around you? Do people trust your decision-making capability, right? And so it becomes even more important to develop these skills, because I think that's what's going to set you apart from the field, from everybody else who's just trying to sell you something or check a box or whatever the case may be. So such a great point, Jay.
So Sharon, there's one question that has been in here for a while. It is from Joe Campo. Is there a relationship here between mindfulness and critical thinking?
I think there's a direct relationship to it, frankly. I haven't studied that particular relationship, but I know from my own life and from anecdotal evidence from clients that critical thinking happens when you're able to see different pieces of evidence clearly, right? And be able to connect the dots, right? And so the more you're able to see exactly what those particular points are without it being cluttered with your perceptions of them or your preconceived notions about what you're expecting to see, because you come to the information fresh. You come to the information fresh. I think that can enhance your critical thinking skills. And that's my sense intuitively, but I don't know. I couldn't speak to anything from a research perspective. That's a great question, Joe.
It is a great question. And on the critical thinking side, it definitely is about mindfulness, and it's about provocation in your thinking before you respond. I would say that's mindful as well, because a lot of times we make decisions on the fly. And when we use critical thinking, which we teach often in leadership, it really is about that human dynamic and what are the consequences of your choices. And so mindfulness, when I think about what you're teaching in your sessions with us, is really putting that critical thinking in perspective and using it not only for strategy. So it's not limited to strategy or tactics. It's also inclusive of who we are fundamentally and how we function as human beings, because we're human beings before we're anything else. I didn't see any other questions. And if I overlooked a question, feel free to open your mic and ask. We should have room for one or two questions. I see a lot of comments. One of them that stood out from Talitha, she said, I realize why this program is so rewarding. You all as a team are in tune with each other. So when you present to us, that energy is projected. Thank you. Thank you, Talitha.
Thank you, Talitha.
Here's a question. What role have you found that intuition and dreams or nightmares play in business decisions / direction?
You know, I found oftentimes dreams, sometimes I only get information through dreams because in my waking life, my mind is too busy. So sometimes I find there's an insight that might come, an idea that might come, a direction that I might want to go in, you know, that I often don't have access to in my waking state. So I pay close attention, you know, to my dreams as information, and not in the literal sense, but in the feeling sense. In the feeling sense, you know, who was with me in the dream. You know, there's people who actually have a profession around working with dreams in terms of extracting meaning. But I know for me personally, they're simply a way of, it's an offering of information that I then run up against my own kind of intuition to see if it's useful or not. So I hope that's useful.
It is. And I wanted to share, so Harold shared that he agrees with you. He's learned to be mindful of his eating, and he's lost 30 plus pounds.
Nice.
And congratulations, Harold. And then there's one, Amber. She was a competitive roller skater as a child. Her coaches taught her breathing techniques and visualization. It was so helpful before heading into competition. I think that's a great point. Particularly when you're going in to do presentations and things that may add a little anxiety, to be able to pause and do some mindfulness, I think is great. Two people referenced Napoleon Hill, great author. We'll include that in our resources.
And you know, Dr. Angie, really quick, because you touched on something, and this has been so powerful for me. I just want to share it really quickly, and it may sound silly, but it worked for me. When I would be in a meeting where I felt challenged, or it was a big meeting and it generated a lot of anxiety, underneath the table, I would just kind of rub my thighs. Like I would rub not like what people would see it, but I would rub my thighs, because what that did is it brought me back into my body, because my body is always present. So it brought me up out of this kind of thinking that, oh my God, what are they thinking of me? This is never going to work out. Oh my goodness.
The gremlin.
The gremlins, where they were fired up. And so it brought me back to what's happening right now. You're prepared. You're clear. This is an opportunity. Be curious about how this is going to work out. It brought me right back to the present moment where I had all my power, as opposed to letting that rule me, and then I would have gotten sweaty and I would have forgot what I learned and all the things. So something like that can also be a tool too, to find some way to come back to your body.
Wonderful. And this last piece, because we'll want to wrap up and let everyone go, but Dr. Cheryl talked about essential oils and aromatherapy and how they are part of holistic practices. Would you like to speak on that?
I don't know much about it. I'm actually attending a session on the 31st about essential oils, because again, I'm trying to load up my toolkit. So I have a friend who I've invited to speak to my community about what they are and how they work. But I've heard great things about it. And like I said, I'm so glad you're asking this question, because fill up your toolkit.
Right.
Whatever works. Yeah.
Well, Jay and I use them daily. I know Jay just responded and talked about he has his diffuser running right now.
Nice.
I have a couple. I have them in my offices outside the home and in my home office. And what I find is they're very calming. I love the lavender and the orange citrus. It just, particularly when stressful things are happening, it seems to help center me and create a relaxation. And I find I'm more creative. And I know Jay had commented to a couple of people about aromatherapy. It's 5 of, so we're going to pass it to Patty to close us out. Thank you, Darlene. I'm sorry, Sharon.
Very welcome.
I'd like to say thanks to all of you for showing up tonight. We just love this group. And I feel like our content, I was really helped tonight by everything that I heard. And you all did a great job with engaging the chat. So we get your messages. We're just so happy that you're receiving what we have to offer. I just wanted to mention that I heard on the news today that today is the last day to enter your census information. They have moved that target a few times. First, it was September 30th, and we talked about it here. The next morning, they said October 30th. But I heard today that today is the last day. So I'm hoping until midnight that you can enter that on mycensus2020.gov. We gave you that link before. Also, early voting started today in North Carolina. I went to 2 voting stations today, and there were cars down the street, people standing everywhere, so I wasn't able to vote today. But I'm going to go every day until I can cast my vote in early voting, because I'd like to vote early. I know some of you probably did, but stay on that. We got to take care of that. That's all I have for this evening. We're still having our Wednesday roundtables. They are wonderful. We get lots of interaction there. Bill Davis is leading us in that charge. So we ask you to come and be with us on Wednesday evenings from 6 to 8. We usually finish around 7:15, 7:30. So that's going wonderful. We have a few new people with us tonight. We hope that you'll come back. Also, ask your friends to come. We have all of the courses are recorded and they can get caught up. But I'm just very pleased at how this has gone. And thank you all so much for receiving us. And if there's nothing else, we'll allow you to go. I know some of you may need to eat dinner. And remember to get your sleep. That's still very important. Thank you all so much, and have a good weekend and rest of the week.
We hope you enjoyed session 7 and found it informative. Over the last 6 sessions, the foundation has been laid for your business plan success. As we move into session 8, expectations are that you continue to be laser focused on the content and your business plan. Also, do not pass on the opportunity to review the program's resource guide, which is listed on the Raleigh SCORE website. Here is the URL. Up next is Session 8, which is now open for registration. Simply go to www.raleigh.score.org. Click on the tab Take a Workshop and register today. The date for Session 8 is October 22nd at 6 p.m. The session title is Financial Planning Session 1 and Navigating Diverse Environments. In Session 8, we'll begin discussing how to build your financial plan. We'll also discuss how you can skillfully and confidently navigate diverse or challenging environments and conversations with confidence. Session 8 is important and requires an extreme focus on the material. Jay Graves and Darlene Thorne will be your facilitators for Session 8. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Good
Take
night.
good care.